to as barbarian kingdoms, founded during its collapse, continued to grow and prosper. Their beginnings, together with the end of the Western Roman Empire, mark the transition from late antiquity to the Middle Ages. The practices of the barbarian kingdoms gradually replaced the old Roman institutions, specifically in the Praetorian prefectures of Gaul and Italy, during the 6th and 7th centuries. 93. In many places, the Roman institutions collapsed along with the economic stability. In some regions, notably Gaul and Italy, the settlement of barbarians on former Roman lands seems to have caused relatively little disruption, with barbarian rulers using and modifying the Roman systems already in place. 94. The Germanic kingdoms in Italy, Hispania and Gaul continued to recognize the emperor in Constantinople as a somewhat nominal sovereign. The Visigoths minted coins in their names until the reign of Justinian I in the 6th century. 95. Some territories under direct Roman control continued to exist in the West even after 480. The domain of Soissons, a rump state in northern Gaul ruled by Syagrius, survived until 486 when it was conquered by the Franks under King Clovis I after the Battle of Soissons. Syagrius was known as the King of the Romans by the 6th century Visigothic coin, struck in the name of Emperor Justinian I. Germanic peoples of the region and repeatedly claimed that he was merely governing a Roman province, not an independent realm. 86. Under Clovis I from the 480s to 511, the Franks would come to develop into a great regional power. After their conquest of Soissons, the Franks defeated the Alemanni in 504 and conquered all Visigothic territory north of the Pyrenees other than Septimania in 507. Relations between the Franks and the Eastern Empire appear to have been positive, with Emperor Anastasius granting Clovis the title of consul following his victory against the Visigoths. At the time of its dissolution in the 800s, the Frankish kingdom had lasted far longer than the other migration period barbarian kingdoms. Its divided successors would develop into the medieval states of France, initially known as West Francia, and Germany, initially known as East Francia. 96. A Moro-Roman realm survived in the province of Mauritania Caesariensis until the early 8th century. An inscription on a fortification at the ruined city of Altava from the year 508 identifies a man named Magiunas, the king of Regnum Mororum et Romanerum, the kingdom of the Moors and Romans. 97. It is possible that Magiuna is the same man as the Massinus who allied himself with the forces of the Eastern Roman Empire against the Vandals in 535. 98. This kingdom was defeated by the Eastern Roman Magister Militum Gennadius in 578 and its coastal territories were incorporated into the empire once more. 99. Germanic Italy. Odoacer's Italy in 480 AD. Following the annexation of Dalmatia, the deposition of Romulus Augustus and the rise of Odoacer as ruler of Italy in 476 received very little attention at the time. 85. Overall, very little changed for the people. There was still a Roman emperor in Constantinople to whom Odoacer had subordinated himself. Interregna had been experienced at many points in the East before, and the deposition of Romulus Augustus was nothing out of the ordinary. Odoacer saw his rule as entirely in the tradition of the Roman Empire, not unlike Ricimer, and he effectively ruled as an imperial governor of Italy and was even awarded the title of Patricius. Odoacer ruled using the Roman administrative systems already in place and continued to mint coins with the name and portrait of Julius Nepos until 480 and later with the name and portrait of the Eastern Augustus, rather than in his own name. 85. When Nepos was murdered in Dalmatia in 480, Odoacer assumed the duty of pursuing and executing the assassins and established his own rule in Dalmatia at the same time. 100. Odoacer established his power with the loyal support of the Roman Senate, a legislative body that had continued even without an emperor residing in Italy. Indeed, the Senate seems to have increased in power under Odoacer. For the first time since the mid-3rd century, copper coins were issued with the legend SC, Senatus Consulto. These coins are recopied by Vandals in Africa and also formed the basis of the currency reform carried out by Emperor Anastasius in the East. 101. Under Odoacer, Western consuls continued to be appointed as they had been under the Western Roman Empire and were accepted by the Eastern court. The first being Caecina Decius Maximus Basileus in 480. Basileus was made the Praetorian prefect of Italy in 483, another traditional position which continued to exist under Odoacer. 102. 11 further consuls were appointed by the Senate under Odoacer from 480 to 493, and one further Praetorian prefect of Italy was appointed, Caecina Mavortius Basilius Decius, 486-493. 103. Solidus minted under Odoacer with name and portrait of the Eastern Emperor Zeno. Though Odoacer ruled as a Roman governor would have and maintained himself as a subordinate to the remaining empire, the Eastern Emperor Zeno began to increasingly see him as a rival. Thus, Zeno promised Theodoric the Great of the Ostrogoths foederati of the Eastern court control over the Italian peninsula if he was able to defeat Odoacer. 104. Theodoric led the Ostrogoths across the Julian Alps and into Italy and defeated Odoacer in battle twice in 489. Following 4 years of hostilities between them, John, the Bishop of Ravenna, was able to negotiate a treaty in 493 between Odoacer and Theodoric whereby they agreed to rule Ravenna and Italy jointly. Theodoric entered Ravenna on 5 March and Odoacer was dead 10 days later, killed by Theodoric after sharing a meal with him. 105. Map of the realm of Theodoric the Great at its height in 523. Following the annexation of the southern parts of the Burgundian kingdom, Theodoric ruled both the Visigothic and Ostrogothic kingdoms and exerted hegemony over the Burgundians and Vandals. Theodoric inherited Odoacer's role as acting viceroy for Italy and ostensibly a patricius and subject of the emperor in Constantinople. This position was recognized by Emperor Anastasius in 497. 4 years after Theodoric had defeated Odoacer. Though Theodoric acted as an independent ruler, he meticulously preserved the outward appearance of his subordinate position. Theodoric continued to use the administrative systems of Odoacer's kingdom, essentially those of the Western Roman Empire, and administrative positions continued to be staffed exclusively by Romans. The Senate continued to function as it always had, and the laws of the empire were recognized as ruling the Roman population. The Goths were ruled by their own traditional laws. As a subordinate, Theodoric did not have the right to issue his own laws, only edicts or clarifications. 106. The army and military officers were exclusively staffed by the Goths, however, who largely settled in northern Italy. 107. Though acting as a subordinate in domestic affairs, Theodoric acted increasingly independent in his foreign policies. Seeking to counterbalance the influence of the empire in the east, Theodoric married his daughters to the Visigothic king Alaric II and the Burgundian prince Sigismund. His sister Amalfrida was married to the Vandal king Thrasimund, and he married Audefleda, sister of the Frankish king Clovis I, himself. 108. Through these alliances and occasional conflicts, the territory controlled by Theodoric in the early 6th century nearly constituted Aristed Western Roman Empire. Ruler of Italy since 493, Theodoric became king of the Visigoths in 511 and exerted hegemony over the Vandals in North Africa between 521 and 523. As such, his rule extended throughout the Western Mediterranean, The Western imperial regalia, housed in Constantinople since the deposition of Romulus Augustulus in 476, were returned to Ravenna by Emperor Anastasius in 497. 109. Theodoric, by now Western Emperor in all but name, could not, however, assume an imperial title, not only because the notion of a separate Western court had been abolished but also due to his barbarian heritage which, like that of Ricimer before him, would have barred him from assuming the throne. 79. With the death of Theodoric in 526, his network of alliances began to collapse. The Visigoths regained autonomy under King Amalaric, and the Ostrogoths' relations with the Vandals turned increasingly hostile under the reign of their new king Athalaric, a child under the regency of his mother Amalasuntha. 110. After the collapse of Theodoric's control of the western Mediterranean, the Frankish kingdom rose to become the most powerful of the barbarian kingdoms, having taken control of most of Gaul in the absence of Roman governance. 96. Amalasuntha continued the policies of conciliation between the Goths and Romans, supporting the new Eastern Emperor Justinian I and allowing him to use Sicily as a staging point during the reconquest of Africa in the Vandalic War. With the death of Athalaric in 534, Amalasuntha crowned her cousin and own relative Theodahad as king, hoping for his support. Instead, Amalasuntha was imprisoned and, even though Theodahad assured Emperor Justinian of her safety, she was executed shortly after. This served as an ideal casus belli for Justinian, who prepared to invade and reclaim the Italian peninsula for the Roman Empire. 110. Imperial reconquest. The Eastern Roman Empire, by occupying some of the former Western Roman Empire's lands, enlarged its territory considerably during Justinian's reign from 527, red, to 565, orange. With Emperor Zeno having juridically reunified the empire into one imperial court, the remaining Eastern Roman Empire continued to lay claim to the areas previously controlled by the Western court throughout late antiquity and the Middle Ages. Though military campaigns had been conducted by the Western court prior to 476, with the aim of recapturing lost territory, most notably under Majorian, the reconquests, if successful at all, were only momentary. It was as a result of the campaigns of the generals Belisarius and Narses on behalf of Eastern Roman Emperor Justinian I from 533 to 554 that long-lasting reconquests of Roman lands were witnessed. 111. Despite also suffering from barbarian incursions, the Eastern Empire had survived the 5th century mostly intact. The Western Roman Empire, less urbanized than the Eastern and more thinly populated, may have experienced an economic decline throughout the late empire in some provinces. 112. Southern Italy, northern Gaul, except for large towns and cities, and to some extent Spain and the Danubian areas may have suffered. The East fared better economically, especially as emperors such as Constantine the Great and Constantius II had invested heavily in the Eastern economy. As a result, the Eastern Empire could afford large numbers of professional soldiers and to augment them with mercenaries, while the Western Roman Empire could not afford this to the same extent. Even after major defeats, the East could, although not without difficulties, buy off its enemies with a ransom or protection money. 113, numbering more than 300,000 soldiers, the Eastern Roman army of Justinian I was among the most powerful in the world. 114, unlike the Visigoths and Ostrogoths, the Vandals in Africa minted their own coinage and were both de facto and de jure independent, often being enemies of both the Western and Eastern Roman empires. 115, with the pro-Roman Vandal king Hilderic having been deposed by Gelimer in 530, 116, Justinian prepared an expedition led by Belisarius. It swiftly retook North Africa between June 533 and March 534, returning the wealthy province to Roman rule. Following the reconquest, Justinian swiftly reintroduced the Roman administrations of the province, establishing a new Praetorian prefecture of Africa and taking measures to decrease Vandal influence, eventually leading to the complete disappearance of the Vandalic people. 117, following the execution of the pro-Roman Ostrogoth Queen Amalasuntha and the refusal of Ostrogoth King Theodahad to renounce his control of Italy, Justinian ordered the expedition to move on to reconquer Italy, ancient heartland of the empire. From 534 to 540, the Roman forces campaigned in Italy and captured Ravenna, the Ostrogothic and formerly Western Roman capital, in 540. The Gothic resistance revived under King Totila in 541. They were finally defeated following campaigns by the Roman general Narses, who also repelled invasions into Italy by the Franks and Alemanni, though some cities in northern Italy continued to hold out until the 560s. Justinian promulgated the Pragmatic Sanction to reorganize the Justinian I, left, was the first Eastern emperor to attempt to reconquer the territories of the Western Roman Empire, undertaking successful campaigns in Africa and Italy in the 500s. Manuel I Comnenos, right, was the last, campaigning in southern Italy in the 1150s. Governance of Italy and the province was returned to Roman rule. The end of the conflict saw Italy devastated and considerably depopulated, which, combined with the disastrous effects of the plague of Justinian, made it difficult to retain over the following centuries. 118, at the time of the collapse of the Western Empire in 476–480, the Visigoths controlled large areas of southern Gaul as well as a majority of Hispania. Their increased domain had been partly conquered and partly awarded to them by the Western Emperor Avitus in the 450s–60s. 119, Justinian undertook some limited campaigns against them, recovering portions of the southern coast of the Iberian Peninsula. Here the province of Spania would last until the 620s, when the Visigoths under King Suintila reconquered the south coast. 120, these regions remained under Roman control throughout the reign of Justinian. 3 years after his death, the Lombards invaded Italy. The Lombards conquered large parts of the devastated peninsula in the late 500s, establishing the Lombard kingdom. They were in constant conflict with the Egarchate of Ravenna, a polity established to replace the old Praetorian prefecture of Italy and enforce Roman rule in Italy. The wealthiest parts of the province, including the cities of Rome and Ravenna, remained securely in Roman hands under the Egarchate throughout the 7th century. 121, map of the Eastern Roman Empire in 717 AD. Over the course of the 7th and 8th centuries, Islamic expansion had ended Roman rule in Africa, and though some bastions of Roman rule remained, most of Italy was controlled by the Lombards. Although other Eastern emperors occasionally attempted to campaign in the west, none were as successful as Justinian. After 600, events conspired to drive the western provinces out of Constantinople's control, with imperial attention focused on the pressing issues of war with Sasanian Persia and then the rise of Islam. For a while, the west remained important, with Emperor Constans II ruling from Syracuse in Sicily, a Roman empire that still stretched from North Africa to the Caucasus in the 660s. Thereafter, imperial attention declined, with Constantinople itself being besieged in the 670s, renewed war with the Arabs in the 680s, and then a period of chaos between 695 and 717, during which time Africa was finally lost once and for all, being conquered by the Umayyad Caliphate. Through reforms and military campaigns, Emperor Leo III attempted to restore order in the empire, but his doctrinal reforms, known as the iconoclastic control